Hello, everybody. I'm very excited to present this video of why I love Ulysses to you. There are two videos to start with before you begin this journey. The other one is 10 tips for how to read it and practical stuff, what you need, why the book is difficult, all that. Obviously, that's a bit more practical, but I think in some ways this video is the more important one in a way because it's what you need to read Ulysses, which is a love of the process of reading Ulysses and an enjoyment of the experience. And I hope that everybody is capable of coming up with a video like this when they're done or along the way of their own. I'm going to bring to you that kind of spark in my own life, what carried me through the book, because it's tough going. So you've got to love some of the aspects of it as you go. Here's what is important for me. And I'll begin that by talking about the book before I even read it, because it already had this sort of strange presence in my life. My sort of prehistory with Ulysses is probably a little different from yours if you live in Ireland. There's nothing ubiquitous about the book in the US. There's no statues of Joyce, as far as I know, in major cities. There's no general knowledge that this book exists. You could go your whole life and never hear of Ulysses if you're from the US. The first time I heard about Ulysses, I was an adult. I worked at a bookstore. I think, my second year in university, and I saw it on the shelf there. And the edition had this sort of weird cover of this man in a jacket and the word Ulysses written vertically on it. Maybe you know that edition. And I asked the guy who owned the bookstore, who was very fond of reading difficult books, and he said, "Oh, yes, that book is very difficult." um, but I didn't really learn anything about it. He only said one other thing, and it's one of the best books ever written. So I didn't read the book, I didn't pick it up, but then there was a class at my school, which was a James Joyce class, and it was taught by Professor Jonathan Quick. Jonathan Quick was the sort of professor that I think is unfortunately absent in many US universities these days. He read books carefully and with great admiration, and he placed them in the context of their time, other novels, history, even natural history and the psychology of the author. And he applied this deep sort of scrutiny and care to the language and the syntax. He wasn't just a theoretician. He didn't just bring a kind of idea of politics and economy to bear on the book that he read. He wasn't just trying to unearth the secret meanings and everything. He loved the book, and he conveyed that love to us as we read it week by week. And I think you really need that approach to Ulysses. So that's what I'm going to try to do as we go through this book together and I read it again alongside all of you. Um, Professor Quick died not too long ago, but I just owe him this great debt for bringing Ulysses into my life because I'd always wanted to live in Ireland. Well, since I came here when I was 15 years old on vacation with my family, but being in that room with him week after week, learning about Joyce's novels and also his book of short stories, Dubliners, it really kind of reinvigorated and restoked my excitement to come live here. So I fell in love with the book partially because it takes place in Ireland and because Professor Quick ignited that love of Ireland in me that was always there, but was a bit dormant at the time. Um, there are a few books, maybe no books, that evoke place as intensely as Ulysses evokes Dublin and Ireland. It's something you should know about Ulysses going in. Ulysses is rooted in real names, real people, real street corners and turns of the road. As I'm sure all of you know, people take tours around Dublin, following the steps and characters of the novel, because you really can do that still, even though plenty has changed here. Maybe you can imagine, if you're not from America, how weird that is for an American, or if you are from America, you can relate to this. A city and countrywide set of events around a huge experimental novel. I mean, you would never think such a thing was possible. Um, I love Ulysses because to evoke that feeling of immersion in the city, it doesn't do expository work. It doesn't explain everything to you. Little bits of the city and little aspects of history just come up in conversation. Um, And I love that. So there can be a conversation between, there's one between two half drunk men talking about a judge, and that judge is a real person. And you can follow that thread as far as you want, or you can just skip past it, as you might if you overheard two half drunk dudes talking about something. Or in fact, something came up when you were drunk and you're talking to your friend. You might not pull out your phone and look it up. You might just let it go and continue with the conversation. But whenever you do go down that rabbit hole and look it up, it always gives you something more, which I find so exciting. I love Ulysses because the plot is so deceptively simple, and yet there's so much to it. Here's the plot of Ulysses. Two guys wander around Dublin on a single day, and eventually they bump into each other. And one woman is living her parallel life to their wanderings. That's it. But the longing and then the meeting of two of the three main characters, Stephen Dedalus and Leopold Bloom, there's also Molly Bloom, Leopold Bloom is her husband, spoke so deeply to me for so many reasons. And then, of course, this life and the imagination and the inner life of this other character, Molly Bloom. Why did it speak so deeply to me? Well, Stephen Dedalus is kind of a wannabe intellectual. He's he's kind of snotty, little dry. I mean, I do like him. A lot of people don't like him, but I really like him. Whereas Leopold Bloom is kind of, he's older, he's a man of the body and worldliness and kind of good humor. And some people break this down as the artistic and the scientific meeting, but I reject all of that. It's not because it's wrong, but because for me, it just doesn't resonate. Instead, I see these two characters in a way as my own struggle in life. That resonates. There's a side of me that wants to be carnal, vulgar, hilarious, ridiculous, fun, you know? And then there's a side of me that longs for a quiet and intense life of reflection and intellectualism, almost monastic in a way. And these are two ways of being that I, for a lot of my life, experienced as very separate. And I was always trying to reconcile them, but they're not actually separate. They're seeking each other. They wander around in different sort of planes of existence in me. You know, like, how do I get these two parts of myself to meet up? So in some ways, I can feel like two lonely men, and I'm seeking myself within my own life. I know that that might sound a little pretentious, but I'm sure that you all have struggles with, like, I want to be this person, but I want to be this person. And you're trying to make those two aspects of yourself meet, or maybe there's more than two aspects. What's the real version of me? Why do I feel so split apart sometimes? Why do my desires and the things I want seem like they can't exist in the same person at the same time? I love Ulysses because it is vulgar. It shows us that we have to live vulgar lives. There's no escape, and we shouldn't even desire escape. The book is a book that is full of shit, of piss, of masturbation. It's full of lust for people we should not lust for, and appetites of all sorts, which caused Ulysses no amount of trouble. The book was censored time and time again, and it required the support of a handful of famous artists and anarchists, mostly women, to get it published and distributed at all. It was and is a book against the state and the state of things. And in fact, Joyce once said, as an artist, I am against every state. The state is concentric, man is eccentric. And I love and I am struck, I am so struck by the way Ulysses alters your consciousness as you read it. Um, I think you're just going to have to read this book to get that point. I can tell you all about it, and I probably will as we go along the course, but you'll notice that your thoughts start emulating the style of Ulysses. And in fact, this is something that came up in some of the court cases and obscenity trials and so forth. But like I said, I think we'll get into that as the course goes along. I also love Ulysses because I now know some of what Joyce was enduring when he wrote it. You don't have to know anything about Joyce to read this book, but let me tell you a little bit about him. While he was writing Ulysses, Joyce was suffering from iritis. He was having his eyes cut open routinely. He had a family to take care of. He was often impoverished. He was writing in the throes of World War, and he was worrying that because of his eyesight, it would all come to naught, that he'd be blinded and unable to finish. None of this is to mention the difficulty of producing the book as a book because of the obscenity laws. The police had the power to search and seize any works through the obscene that were thought to be obscene or that were seen to be against the state. So typists had their husbands throw drafts into the fire. The US government ruled against the lesbian anarchists who were working to publish Ulysses and more. So Ulysses was being serialized in literary journals run by anarchists and was being attacked. In the US, the battle was particularly difficult to fight because the post office was an arm of the government and in many ways an arm of the police. And employees of the post office were paid to seize material and destroy it and charge anyone who was distributing that material with a crime. So this could be, anti-state content, sexual content, whatever. And Ulysses has a bit of everything in it. There's challenges to religion. There's certainly sexual content. There's very graphic bodily content every once in a while. There's challenges to the government. I mean, everything in this book. The histories of the history, the histories of Ulysses are histories of liberation and perseverance in the name of art and the individual. So I love this book because I know what Joyce went through to write it. I know some of the things that were happening in the world to just even get it out into the world at all, and all the people that came together to make this book possible. And so for me, that kind of softens the blow of being like, but it's so hard to read. It was really hard to get out. And I love that. I love that that act of love was carried out. And now I get to experience and encounter this book. And I know you will too. So, like I said, at the end of the course, I'm sure you'll all be able to make videos like this. I'm not saying you have to, it's not homework or anything, but maybe every once in a while you want to write down little things that you love as you go along. Not just the notes of things you don't understand, but oh, I love this. Oh, this is very cool. Make those little notes as you go so you can reflect on all of that at the end. Okay, everybody, that's it. Let's read Ulysses together.